to them no know it's from creation. I to them no know it's from creation. Bam bam hey yo, what a bam 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 dilang, bam 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 dilang.
Man, what's up, y'all? What's up, y'all? I grew up being the weakest link, but I had to forgive him. You feel me? Man, look, Thursday morning, just finished my Thursday run. You know what I'm saying? I'll put the details from my Strava right there, right there. You feel me? But I'm telling you, I grew up being the weakest link, and I had to forgive him, or else I was gonna grow up with hatred. For some reason, I mean, we're all guilty of this, but we tend to show contempt towards the weak, and the strong gets the respect. No matter what the community is, if you portray yourself as weak, it's human nature for people to want to take advantage of that. And I don't understand, it's just the devil, but we all have it in us, you know? We're all held guilty to that. You know, I'm out here making this video right now, by the way. There's a truck right here. There's a white man looking at in this store. He looking dead at me, make sure I ain't finna break into his car. You know what I'm saying? If I had a bum rush his car, he gonna think I'm gonna do something, right? But anyways, I had to forgive him so I could be forgiven as well. I had to show grace and forgiveness towards my counterparts, my adversaries, because people wanted to not show me the support that I needed because they thought that I was weak. You know, I grew up playing high school basketball, but I always felt like I was behind the curve. I didn't start learning the game of basketball. Hold on. I ain't started learning it. Every time people drive by, they be staring at me. It's like they surprised to see somebody out here doing something out the ordinary. I get it, because they ordinary, right? Or, you know, people just be curious. But anyways, I grew up playing basketball, and I started to learn the game of basketball the same time I started to learn. So my 9th grade year, my first time playing official basketball for any team, my first team ever was in my high school team. That was me learning the game, learning the positions, learning how to box out, learning all the fundamentals as I'm trying to learn skill as well. I was learning fundamentals as I was also learning skill, right? So obviously I wasn't that good. Basketball is one of those things you have to grow up with. Now I grew up, you know, I started playing basketball since I was like 5 years old, but I didn't really play seriously until I made my team for the first time, 9th grade. So I was always behind the curve. I'm playing with kids who already had an athletic background. You know, not everybody, but most of them, right? So when the power scale was always going to be different. I'm behind the curve, I'm learning, but we're young. We're not really that cognitive of social norms and, you know, functionality in our daily lives. So we just see somebody as weak and we judge them off that. We don't give them grace to be like, dang, well, maybe he grew up a different way. Maybe he grew up some way. We go off what we see. We're living our lives face value, right? So, of course, I wasn't going to get no grace, you know, but, man, this white dude kept staring at me, bro. And as soon as I looked at him, he would, like, turn his head. It's like, bro, like, have you been a punk your whole life? You know what I'm saying? Probably, you know what I'm saying? That's the thing. When you see, like, an older person being a certain way, they probably been that way their whole life. When they look like they a shell, when they look scared, they nervous, timid, like you've been here 50 years, you've been a shell of yourself. I refuse to be that. But anyways, when I was playing basketball, you know, I had to learn how to forgive myself and forgive others based off how they treated me. You know, I didn't get the grace. You know, I had players talking shit about me. I had the coach talking shit about me, you know, and I wasn't even like super tough. So it's not like people should have like hid it around me. But that just shows that people really are cowards. You know, they don't really say things to your face. You know, they smile in your face, but they be afraid to actually say it to you. You know, I did get ridiculed in my face, but a lot of people didn't feel guilty about doing it behind my back either. I just played like I didn't know what was going on, but I knew what was going on. There were certain moles that would tell me certain things. You know, were they lying? Who knows? I doubt it. You know, either way, I grew up around a lot of fake activity. And when I became an adult, you know, going through college, you know, that's really when I started to grow into my peak athleticism. I graduated high school at 17. And where I'm from, the culture of sports and going D1 is not that prevalent and prominent compared to growing up in like South Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, California, Texas, Alabama, places like that. Where I'm from in North Florida, it's kind of quiet over here. So we didn't really have like a D1 mindset in my area. Few players did, but it wasn't like a majority thing. Nowadays with social media, everybody can see LaMelo do what he do. Everybody can see Bronny James do what he do. Back in the day, like me and my friends would watch Hoop Mixtape, but like we would never it wasn't like a cultural thing. Everybody didn't know about it. We wouldn't always talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So where I'm at now, I realized that when I became a grown man, matter of fact, when I started to grow up to my later teens and my really early 20s, 21, 22, I started growing peak athleticism. I started to learn the game of basketball. I became my best basketball player really as I was getting out of college, at 21, 22, 23. So if I had the mentality that I have now back then in high school, I could have definitely went as far as I wanted to go, you know what I'm saying? But it's just hard when you don't have the mentality and the support around you. I had love around me from my household, but I just didn't have camaraderie that was trying to push me and help me become better, as far as I knew at least. I had a friend who told me who I could be if I just worked, but this was the same friend who kind of threw dirt around me as well. So when you're young, it's kind of hard to process those things. But that's just all in short of how, I grew up being the weak link, And as when I was in college, I was trying to work off all my old trauma. I was trying to heal from my past pain that my coach put me through, that players put me through, that girls put me through, that my friends put me through. All throughout my college years, it was in the back of my mind, And I didn't realize that I was going through that until I became a grown-er adult around 24, 25. I started to realize, why do I feel so nervous about things? Where does my performance anxiety come from? It came from that high school basketball trauma, And this sounds like, something that a lot of people wouldn't take serious unless you've been through it yourself. I know a couple other people who can relate to what I was going through as well. A lot of people feel like it's so hard and so controversial to talk about their own feelings, yet they praise me for talking about mine. And I appreciate it, but it's understanding that you can do it too, I became a grown man starting to heal from past traumas that I went through adolescence, I started to see people older than me that never really went through that stage. They just buried their emotions and never grew. Became a grown adult, a grown jit. You feel me? And where I'm at, I'm just understanding that if I didn't forgive those people from my past, I would have became an angry soul. I wouldn't have been blessed with where I'm at. If people try to come back into your life, ask for advice, ask for certain things, you gotta forgive people, I'm always down to try to help somebody with their walk because I don't want blood on my hands, right? But understand that I ain't forget. And a lot of people, they may have even forgot. So there's no point even going back and rehashing people and try to get people to admit their faults. There's no point. You're only doing that for your ego. You don't even need closure. That's just for your ego so you can feel better. Why are we going out our way to risk our life for feelings? Why are we doing all this just for a feeling, right? Why do we do these things? Feelings drive us as well, but there's certain feelings that you don't have to dig back up. I don't believe in getting closure. A lot of y'all just don't know how to let go and walk away. A lot of y'all just don't know how to clear the scene at the first red flag. I get it. That was me. Every girl I've been with, every single one, there's a red flag day one of us meeting, introducing ourselves to each other. But, I was young and I was ignorant. And now I've learned from my mistakes and I've learned to get better at the way I deal with people, the way I deal with others, the way I deal with my elders, the way I deal with the youth, the way I deal with randoms, and the way I deal with myself, right? And where I'm at, I'm just gracious that God allows me to wake up and realize this. I ain't even mean to prophesy, but I'm telling you, I had to forgive those from my past. I grew up the weakest link, and it was up to me to forgive them, right? It was up to me to forgive them, I grew up the weakest link, and that does a lot to you, And little did I know that I was really strong the whole time. I just didn't know it. I grew up feeling like I needed to be validated outside of my household. I didn't really have confidence. I just had a natural swag and smoothness to me that I was able to get by. I wasn't trying to get by. I was just living my life, being myself. But if you put me in like a room and I had to present something in front of a bunch of people, I would be terrified. If you put me in a situation where I had to like showcase my talents, you know, I would fold. Performance anxiety. Basketball gave me performance anxiety, right? It's one of those things. But really, like, my natural state is a calm, smooth dude. That's what the women say, you feel me? Like, that's what those in my past said. That's what people told me in my life. That's what I see myself as, right? And I just didn't really realize it. But my normal, natural state, I'm cool just like my daddy, you feel me? And overall, I gotta live in that. I gotta live in who God allowed me to become at a base level. And I can expound upon that. I've grown in a lot of wisdom. I've grown in a lot of patience. And I got a long way to go. I still be losing patience over the mundane. You feel me? But I grew up the weakest link and I had to forgive them so I can also forgive myself. Shalom.